Hi. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This is Marlene Otero. She's one of our associate licensed mental health counselors. It's so nice to have you.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I would love for you to just share a little bit about you and, kind of your career and your paths up to now, if you're comfortable sharing that.
Yeah. So I actually became a mental health counselor because of the stress and anxiety that I felt from being a lawyer. So I've been practicing law. If you ask me, I've done like every area of law you can imagine. I've done it all. I've been practicing for about 7 years prior to deciding to go back to school.
Wow.
Um, yeah, I honestly knew nothing about mental health, and like I'm telling you, I was in my early 30s when this happened, and I didn't grow up in a household where we discussed mental health at all. It just was never discussed, so I didn't understand what I was going through, why I was like my chest was, feeling heavy, why I was like struggling, wanting to go to work. And it really just, once I learned about kind of mental health, I started reading. Actually, my first book I ever read was The Body Keeps the Score. Um,
Oh,
and that kind of like changed my whole like thought process around it, and it really resonated with me. So yeah, I went back to school to become a clinical mental health counselor while practicing law at the same time. In fact, I still practice law. And
wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I do both. And yeah, so I I went back to school while practicing, and then I graduated and am now in my associate's license. And I work with a lot of high achieving individuals. So essentially, people who are struggling with anxiety, stress, burnout, and all of those areas impact, your the rest of your world because, just because you're high achieving and can multitask doesn't mean that you're immune to stress or anxiety. So something that I had to learn. And so, because we all want to do it all, but sometimes we do need to seek guidance, and that's something that I am very passionate about, and um, why I decided to do this.
I love that. So, as far as kind of why you decided to become a therapist, it sounds like basically you were struggling in that role as a lawyer and you're like, "Okay, wait, like this isn't supposed to be happening. I thought maybe I would be." Tell me a little bit about that moment or as kind of you were getting to that point of what you thought was gonna be success. Like, what was that transition like for you, or what inspired you to kind of make a shift?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I think that lawyers are essentially trained um, to analyze, strategize, seek solutions, and so that's what I was trying to do, right? Like make sure to help other people, help other individuals work during high conflict situations, manage my own stress in those situations, make sure to stay calm under pressure. Those are things that we were taught in law school. And so I think that I really took that to heart. And I honestly, being a lawyer was my identity. Like I didn't know who I was without being a lawyer. I had worked my whole life towards it. I did pre law when I was an undergrad. Then I did then I worked at a law firm as a paralegal for a couple years, and I went to law school. Right, I never knew anything else. So, yeah, that was my identity, and I very much equated my self worth to achievements and
Mm,
my success.
mhm.
Yes, exactly. I love how you just put it all together like that. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's exactly what
absolutely.
happened.
That
Yeah, it was
makes
this.
sense, and I think they teach you kind of a little bit to do that because in order to succeed and get to that level, you kind of have to be so invested. So it makes sense.
Yes. Oh, 100%. There's so much that goes into it. And that's another thing I was thinking of when I was thinking about talking about, kind of the impacts of being in a high achieving profession is I don't think we give ourselves enough grace. I think we're constantly striving for the next thing. It's like, just to take law as an example, it's like you take the LSAT. Okay, now it's law school. Okay, now it's the bar exam. Now it's getting that big job. Now or the job of your dreams, whatever that may be, right? And then
Yeah.
it's having to and then becoming a senior associate and then becoming a partner and then
Mhm.
maybe potentially owning your own firm. So there's always something. And I feel like one thing I've been working on with my clients is stop and smell the roses. Like stop and like think about all the achievements you've accomplished and how far you have come.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like if you're always looking towards that next thing, there's always going to be something and it's never going to quite fulfill you and like
Yes.
your happiness. So that makes total sense. So, how does that kind of tie into maybe how potentially people misunderstand the emotional demands of legal work? Like, what do you think people outside the legal profession often like misunderstand about how emotional and demanding it is in legal
Yeah.
work?
No, that's a good question. I think that, lawyers are the people that you go to, like when you're dealing with a crisis, or some like terrible situation often. Unfortunately, this isn't the case. Is like you don't go to a lawyer when you're like really happy.
Yeah.
It's
It's
usually
not
because
like
you're
going
dealing
to
with,
the nail salon or something.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's something I don't think I fully thought of when I went into the law was that was like what I was going to be doing is dealing with high conflict all the time. Um,
absolutely.
but with that said, that is why people in these as a lawyer, and I'm even talking about like the medical profession and teachers, and heck, I even have a couple clients that are social media influencers, and even that like there's a lot that goes into having to make sure that you're or like that they're being high achieving and they're constantly doing the next big thing. Um, Oh, so secondary trauma. So that is one thing that I've taught. I'm going to say that I don't think any of my clients ever heard the term secondary trauma or even vicarious trauma. And so it's something that I actually talk about with my clients a lot because, you know, again, let's take the legal profession as an example. We're working with people who have been severely injured, in car accidents or otherwise any area of law, whether it's an assault that, you're working with someone who's been assaulted or even family conflict, like watching a family deal with divorce and the struggle of, where does a child go, the push and the pull, like attorneys see it all. And so
Yeah.
it does take a very strong emotional, like, um, it affects their mental well-being, severely. It can be emotionally draining to see that day in and day out and having to manage that, even if it's not your own, it's so much. And so the one thing I constantly think of too is compassion fatigue. So I was a public defender and started my career as a public defender. I was super passionate about it. But I'm a highly empathetic person, which is one of my, it's a great asset, but it's also a little bit of a downfall in some
Yeah.
professions
Yeah.
because I found myself really just struggling with my client situations. And I also represented like kids that were, I'm sorry, that parents that were losing their children due to, whatever situation. There was a lot of, substance abuse, and it was
Yeah.
hard to see that, um, hard to deal with that. I also was in drug court. I was the attorney for drug court, juvenile drug court to be specific,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
seeing what those juveniles went through, and having to deal with a lot of absent parents, which honestly made me realize, oh, this is why this is happening. There's like a whole, there's so many things involved. Like I was young then, and it sucked seeing, it was hurtful, and I remember going home and crying. Like it was hard.
Mhm. It kind of opens your eyes to just these pieces of the world and things that are happening that maybe if you weren't maybe in one of these fields, you would never see, you would never know, and so it's great because you can build this compassion, I think, and understanding for why maybe people end up where they do or why they become the way they are. But at the same
Yes.
time, you're literally having to see it all the time. And it really just, I think, thinking about what that could do, it would be really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was, and so, I mean, I think that's something that people a lot of the times being an attorney can be a very thankless job because, they're expecting, us to fix everything, and I think the same thing for, like, doctors who you expect to go in and things to fix, and if anything goes wrong, maybe it's sometimes they're not happy with you, and then, but they don't, I definitely want people to recognize that, we're human too, like, and so it can be really difficult to go through that. And then another thing is it doesn't it doesn't stop. Life keeps lifing, you
Mhm.
know then you have to
Yeah.
take that home. So then it's like, then it's affecting, your relationship, or, your parenting, or, if you have health problems, are you taking care of those things? So it literally impacts every area of your life.
Absolutely. And that makes total sense. And so what do you kind of think in that if someone was in that space, like, and they don't know what to do, or yeah, well, how do you get out of that, or how do you recognize that maybe you're in that space of burnout?
um, it's funny because I think that that's one of the biggest issues that I noticed while being in the profession, is that I think you're on, like, I don't even know what the word is, like, just like autopilot, I guess would be the word, of
Yeah.
like just
Yeah.
working, waking up, going to work, answering emails, working weekends. I mean, being like overworked is kind of like, glorified in these professions. Work those long hours, work those weekends, get those billables in.
But
No,
you about how people, I think it's just that people are so overworked, and that's
yeah,
almost expected of you in those
yes,
fields, especially in the legal profession. So it's almost like you have to give yourself the space to even know that you're potentially overworked or you're burned out. So it's kind
yes,
of like you need that space. But you were kind of getting to
yes.
the point that, if you don't have that space, that you wouldn't know that you're overworked.
Right. And okay, I love that you just kind of brought me back to that,
Yeah,
because one of the
I was
things
following.
yeah, one of the things I tell clients all the time is, like, you want to treat your mental health just like you treat your physical health. Like, people go to doctors all the time for preventative care, right? You check your blood work, you make sure you're okay, like, where's your cholesterol level at? What do we need to do to lower it? They give you nutrition plan, whatever, all that. But, like, for some reason, at least I think with high achieving individuals, that's not on their mind with mental health. It's more about, okay, when the problem gets really bad, then I'm going to seek help. But I believe that mental health can be preventative. The seeking therapy is a preventative measure to make sure that you're handling your emotional and mental well being, and which then makes you more productive with work, which is something that I really hope and really want to get into, like letting law firms and, like, employers and just the industry in general, like the medical industry and the legal profession, like, hey, if you take care of your employees, they will be more productive, and in
Yeah,
turn make
they'll
make
work
you more
harder.
money. Exactly.
Mhm. Yeah, because I think, as I see therapy a lot, it's basically it gives them space to process, and it gives them space to work through things that, potentially could cause a big issue down the line. So if you're,
Right.
hearing a lot of trauma, and you need to have space to talk about it and process it with someone. I think that's really important.
Yes.
So almost it's kind of like if you're in one of these fields potentially, like it's almost like you kind of need that. You kind of need it no matter what, even if maybe you don't feel super stressed. It's like it's gonna hit you one day or another.
Yeah, I think it accumulates over time, and so and that's the thing. Like, I'm very honest with people, and I'm very transparent about my story. And my story is that I was working in a large firm. I was doing really well, and then all of a sudden, I started experiencing panic attacks, and I started to really struggle. I woke up every morning dreading having to go to work. I mean, like, felt sick to my stomach, almost like nauseated. And I realized, oh my gosh, like, I'm not okay. I'm not okay. And that's when I sought help. Just like, of course, like I said, didn't seek help at all until, it was to that level.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit more about that experience that you had where you said you were at a big law firm and it almost felt like you were almost sick to your stomach, it sounds like.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Um, it was feeling pressure to constantly make sure that I was performing, that I was meeting my billables, that I was attending the trial skills training, that I was doing other training videos or writing um, blogs, which is something that the firm strongly recommended. It was almost a requirement, essentially. But that was not something that we would be allowed to put on our billables because it wasn't towards the client. So it took up more time. And so I did feel this constant pressure to just make sure I was performing. But at the same time, I felt like I had imposter syndrome because was
Mm,
constantly feeling like, am I doing enough? Am I doing enough? Am I a good attorney? I remember one time a partner telling me, if you don't do this trial skills training, that was like a whole like several week program. And I was already like struggling to meet my billables. I hadn't taken vacation in forever. And they told me, then you're not, you don't want to be a good lawyer. You're not trying to further
wow.
your career if you don't do this. So of course, like I'm a people pleaser. Unfortunately, it's something I've been working on for a long time, setting boundaries, and I'm a lot better than I was then, of course. But it it was something that I pretty much didn't do then, and so I took on everything. And so that's something I strongly work on my clients with is setting boundaries, taking care of yourself, because this is a very commonly used phrase, but if you do not take care of yourself, you cannot take care of anyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and it can be really hard, especially when you're kind of trained through all of these different schools and just trains of thought that you need to achieve. And I think it almost is counterproductive. And so it leads people into this space where they don't know how to do that. They don't know how
Right.
to set boundaries. They don't know how to take care of themselves.
Right.
Um, so basically at that time, it sounds like you were experiencing panic attacks. Tell me a little
Yes.
bit about kind of how that transpired and what kind of that point was that you asked for help. What did that look like for you?
Oh man, it was like several weeks before I even asked for help. I mean, it was like to the point where I was calling out of work. I mean, I was waking up in the morning, I would hyperventilate at the thought of having to get on the bus to go to work, you know? Um, and I mean, I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep because I would just be thinking about, everything I had to do, all the cases I was working on, the emails I had to respond to. And that's even just like the bare minimum. I mean, did I have some opposing counsel that maybe was like difficult to work with? Yeah. And the high conflict situations really started to eat at me. It's interesting because I think like in the very beginning, you're able to kind of handle it more, but the more you do it, it just keeps eating at you and eating at you. And it just got to a point
Constant.
where yeah, it was constant. It was like that high conflict was constant. And now looking at the research and stuff, I'm like, oh, my cortisol levels were probably like super high that my
Yeah.
body just shut
Super
down.
stressed. Mhm.
I was so stressed, so that it caused severe anxiety and my body just completely shut down. So yeah, it was after several weeks of experiencing that. I mean, I couldn't even like go to the gym. I would try to go to the gym to like relieve stress, and
Yeah.
I would be in a corner, like being like, I can't do this. I just need to go home. There'd be times I'd stare at my computer like for hours trying to figure out like what do I work on next. And that wasn't normal. Like I was able to usually multitask and do all the things. So I knew something was wrong with me, but it had to appear in that way for me to even do anything about it. And this isn't something that just happened overnight. This is something that had happened over several years. Um, and I just, it took that to address it.
Yeah, it kind of had to get to that point to really kind of force you to take a break and see what you needed in that space.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that's for a lot of
So
my clients. They don't come to me until they've experienced something like that.
absolutely. So why do you think it can be so difficult for professionals to ask for help?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could like again goes back to like we are trained to work hard, meet your billables. Like those are what makes you a great lawyer. Those are essentially I think a lot of like high achieving individuals. Your self worth is very much tied to achievements, and so you know asking for help. It's like we're supposed to be the people that you come to
Yeah, you're
us
the
for.
helpers.
Yeah, we're the helpers.
Yeah.
So like,
Mhm.
we're not supposed to be asking for help. So I think it's hard for some people. And then in addition to that, I think there's that generational and cultural like divide as well. Like those factors that play into it is like I know, my parents with their generation, like definitely mental health is not a thing and almost like frowned upon. Like what do they used to call therapists? What's the word? Shrink, a shrink, right?
Mhm. A
And so
shrink, yeah.
that's like, no, I don't really know. I don't really care. Like, whatever, like, you want to call
I
me.
know.
But at the same time, I
Yeah.
know that wasn't like, oh, you're going to go see a shrink. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So that's something that I think is still very much prevalent. And as you know, in cultural societies, there are some cultures that are also grow up learning like you have to handle it yourself. You know, you have to learn how to do this. Like you can't rely on other people. You know, and I think that's probably a misconception with therapy is that you're not relying on anyone. You're doing the work yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I tell my clients that all the time when, and actually usually in their intake session, I tell them therapy is not done in this 1 hour session. You know, it's done outside of the session. It's done outside of this where you have to be able to do the work, whether it's like reflecting or doing some behavioral things outside, or maybe like trying to understand patterns or do communication exercises with your partner, whatever it is. I do strongly believe that, you know, you have to take the work outside of the therapy room.
Yeah. Exactly. Um, I want to talk a little bit more about how you said that professionals tend to like intertie their identity into their work.
Mhm.
How do you help people separate that, like their professional role and their accomplishments from their identity?
Yeah. So the first thing I do is this is kind of part of acceptance and commitment therapy, which I love and use a lot of, is analyzing your values. Like, what truly are your values? You know, are your values actually working every weekend and every night and not being at home with your family? You know what I mean? Like, what is that doing? So let's like discuss that. You know, and you know, it may be, it may not, and then there's no judgment, right? But like, I like to really try to learn, are you living to your values, or is this really who you are? Or was this something that was ingrained in you? You know, and there are parts of who we're all a part of who, you know, the lessons we learned, right? And the things, the experiences we saw as a child. That's all going to be a part of us. But, you know, just like trauma can have impacts, those experiences do as well. And is it serving us now? You know, is it something that serves us now in the life that we're trying to create for ourselves? Um, and so, you know, that's something that I think is like huge. And I think a lot of clients have had some breakthroughs in realizing, like, oh, well, no, like I don't actually want this. And then we also analyze, like, when you do this, like, how is it impacting you? You know, what are some emotions you're feeling? How is it impacting your body? Like, body and mind are so connected. You know what I mean? So, like, that's why my body shut down when I was so stressed and anxious, is because they're so connected. And so, you know, a lot of the times, like, we can kind of explore that connection with clients.
Yeah, and kind of build the practice of connecting with your body and understanding, when you're having emotions and maybe not compartmentalizing so much that it causes an issue down the line and kind of spending that time practicing connecting to yourself. I could see that being really beneficial. And yeah, as far as analyzing your values, like if you don't spend time like thinking about actually who you are and what you want, then work will kind of just absorb a lot of
Yeah.
you, I think. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that makes sense as a good strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So do you have any kind of like strategies that maybe professionals could use to create some healthier boundaries at work?
Yeah.
I know we talked about that a little bit earlier.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So, you know, one of the things, and I mean, I hate to characterize, but like I do see this a lot more in women than men, is I have to teach assertiveness skills, you know, and just being like, hey, let's talk about how you're gonna talk to your the partner or your boss about that, right? And it's about you know, not being too like harsh or aggressive, but it's also being assertive and telling them like what you need, what you want, and why, you know, that's important. And I think that's hard for a lot of people who are people pleasers, or who again have like imposter syndrome or equate self-worth with achievements. So I think it's kind of breaking that mold to try to help them understand. So that's one thing, right? Assertive skills I think are like important. Boundary setting, we talked about that already, right? That's incredibly crucial to improving your mental well-being, is making sure that you have boundaries. And I always tell my clients this, I'm like, look, I I say all this and I know it's true. I'm not saying I'm perfect, right? I still struggle
Yeah.
with it as well. So like I'm human, we're human, it happens. And then the other thing is like I like to teach practical skills too, like for those that are dealing with high anxiety and who do have like the dread feeling, right? Like because that is common, it happens, and so we talk about grounding skills, and mindfulness and breathing exercises. It's so crazy how simple it is to just do, a box breathing, right? But a lot of people don't typically do it. And can you imagine like taking in all that like air into our lungs and like how many people actually like daily just go, I feel so
Yeah.
good just then, just
Yeah.
doing it myself. Like that felt amazing. And I feel like
Mhm.
people don't do it enough. So I'm always like, and people kind of thinks it's silly sometimes when my clients, especially being like the logical people, they're like, really, you're going to make me do a deep
You're like,
breathing
"Oh, whatever."
exercise? Yeah. And I'm like, hey, like, I'm telling you, it'll help. So there's just a lot of little practical things. But I try to meet the client where they are as well. And if they're not ready to do it and they think it's like frou frou or whatever, okay, fine, let's talk about that. Or let's, analyze where these patterns are coming from and why they're happening. So, and sometimes that leads to us exploring their past. So, yeah.
Absolutely. No, I felt better even just after taking that. I realized I hadn't taken a deep breath all day, so
Yeah,
I felt
I know.
better.
Me too.
Okay. Um, yeah, that's great. I'm just kind of looking through
I can as well.
anything else. I don't want to take too much of your time, but anything else you feel like is really important that you want to touch on or that you feel
Oh,
like
I one thing I forgot to mention is I don't know how we want to start this, but essentially um I think a lot of oh no, we did talk about this. I think like one of the things I wanted to talk about is how I think people kind of high achieving individuals believe that once they reach a certain level of success, that like
mm,
that's going to be when stress is gone. Like that's going to be when things are good. But like it actually that's not the case. Often it's that that's just a different kind of stress or anxiety. Or maybe it's like it just looks different. So you want to become partner and you've worked all these years to do it and you think that when you reach partner you're gonna be in a better spot, but like really that is something that can still cause a certain level of stress and anxiety. So I think that all ties into kind of too just like being mindful of your achievements and like taking time to stop and acknowledge like everything that you've done.
and enjoy them. And, I always like come back to the saying of wherever you go, there you are. So if there's things that you're not addressing or anxieties and issues that you're not addressing in time, there wherever you go and whatever you achieve and whoever you become, they're still going to be there unless you take the time to address them.
Right. Right. Exactly. Oh, and another thing I was thinking with therapy, we talked about, kind of what do we do to try to work with clients who are dealing with this sort of thing. And I think a, a high achieving professionals and attorneys in general, like we think of therapy as like what we see in the movies, like the individual kind of like lying on the couch, like and then the therapist is like, okay, like, tell me how that makes you feel, right? But it's so much more and I don't know if that's how it used to be, right? But like in my world, like it's a collaborative environment. We're trying to learn about like, you know, where these patterns come from. We try to analyze that together and we we'll use practical tools to try to help alleviate some of those things. So there is like it's just a completely different I think attorneys have never done therapy again, like don't understand how it works. So that's something that, I work on kind of explaining to them very early on so that there's no like, um, I guess, concern or worry. I also let them know first and foremost, like this is a non-judgmental space. Like you can tell me anything, and I obviously there's also privileged information as well. And I let them know that, and that they understand that because there's attorney-client privilege as well. So
Yeah.
I
You're like,
think
okay.
sometimes that helps them open up
Yeah, and creates a safe space. And I
more.
do think I agree that, media and kind of the spaces that have portrayed therapy, in the past and even honestly to the present day, does kind of make it a very kind of one-sided process or like you need to just spill your guts out, to them. And, I think therapy has changed so much in like the way that it uses different modalities and
Yeah.
can kind of come to meet you, whoever you are, wherever you are. If you find the right person that you connect with, you guys can work through those different things together. And it is a lot more collaborative than I think it is portrayed, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Absolutely. So kind of just to close it out, like what would be your advice for someone that maybe is stuck and doesn't maybe that resonated with some things that you said and could see, potentially they need help. Like how would you encourage them?
Uh, let me think about that. Encourage them to like, I guess, can you ask me the question again? I'm not really sure.
Yeah. So let's say someone like resonated with some things that you said, or maybe sees themselves in some of the emotions and feelings that, maybe you had in your past. How would you encourage them to seek help to find therapy or other things that are going to help them in that circumstance?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think just the first step is just, going on Psychology Today or going on like trying to find Google, just Google anxiety and stress, whatever it may be, like, and you'll find, someone that can help you. And sometimes it does take a couple times. Like even when I do consultations, I tell my potential clients, I may not be the right fit for you. It is important to find someone that you do resonate with and someone that you care about. And that's why I do think I don't think I've been very vocal about the fact that like I've practiced law for several years now. Um, but I do think coming forward and being like, hey, like I do have this experience. I do know what it's like to go through trial and, what it's like to deal with opposing counsel and, motion practice. So that resonates with certain people, right? And I think that's what's beautiful about like the therapy environment and like world is that there are certain people that you will resonate more with than with others. And if you can find that person, I mean, that could really go a long way in helping you with your mental well being. And you know, I just think that's what I would recommend is to try to find someone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think having shared experiences with people like that, if let's say someone was looking for help and they didn't realize that, oh, if we've had the same profession or if we've had maybe similar experiences, that will really help you connect or resonate. I mean, most likely. But yeah, I think that that helps a lot. So I'm
I
glad
mean,
that you shared that.
yeah, and like you just said that like, and it made me think like, and a lot of I would say almost most of my clients are not attorneys, right? I have people from all different professions, but like I'm still able to understand, just the levels of burnout and stress and the fact that you know, it kind of comes in different each person kind of shows it in different ways, right? So and like I said, I meet people where they are. So that's something that I'm actually very passionate about and really enjoy doing is kind of learning about that individual, like what makes them tick, what's impacting them, what do we need to really be focusing on? Because everyone is just so different, they have different perspectives, different upbringings. And um, I personally just find it so interesting to learn about people and like what someone could even have the same type of upbringing, right? Or same story, but like the way it impacted them is very different. So yeah,
Yeah, it's a pleasure and like an honor, I feel like, to be able to witness people's stories and
it
hear
is.
what has shaped them. And
Yes.
I'm just so thankful that we have people that are willing to listen and share that time with people in space and make a safe space because it is really hard to like let it out and to share.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I know, and that's one thing I realized when I was an attorney, like in handling, I'm working with my clients who were sometimes victims. I would be like focused on their emotional well-being, being, oh my gosh, how is this impacting you? Even how is the litigation impacting you? Like, what do you need, right? And then I'd have to stop and think, oh wait, no, that's not my role. So
Yeah. Like, no, no, no. Yeah. Do you ever find that hard to kind of because do you still practice law,
I
right? Okay.
do.
Do you ever find that kind of hard to not, you know, put your therapist hat on or
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, there are a lot of times that I see things and I'll still like as an attorney, I'll still say something. I'll still be like, "Hey, like, I think you need to, seek therapy, or like maybe you should do a couple deep breathing exercises before the deposition. Maybe that'll help you." So my therapist side still comes out.
yeah.
It's still there. It's gonna
Can't
come
help
out.
it.
yeah, I can't help it. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like, you know, I think that that caring side has always been there, but I almost feel like, you know, the tools that I've learned, and even like the different modalities, has helped me become a better lawyer. You know what I mean? So like, I'm able to understand like what my clients have been through, and in that, able to represent them better.
Yeah. No, I think that that could be a huge benefit, especially in that you're
Yeah.
able to recognize, what they're going through and maybe what they need in that moment or what they don't need. And you're able to kind of relate with them on a different level and a deeper level. I feel like that would absolutely benefit your practice in both areas.
Yeah, yeah. It's honestly surprising to me that law schools don't offer some sort of like mental health class. I think it would be really
Yeah, because you're
beneficial.
you're dealing with people all the time. I mean, it's a
Oh yeah,
people-focused industry. So I'm honestly surprised and I feel like they should do that.
me too.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll I'll advocate for that, moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much again for,
Thank you.
spending some time with me and sharing. And I really just appreciate your perspective. And, I'm really grateful for your time and energy and just you showing up. It means a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for doing this. I'm glad to share kind of my experience, and also, I would love to just, try to eventually take this out to companies, and eventually just change the industry so that mental health is no longer a taboo, right? I think it's improved a little bit, but I think there's still a long ways to go. So,
Absolutely. I agree. And that I think is something that we, see every day, people struggling. And if there were more resources and access, through employers or otherwise, I think it would make a
yeah,
huge difference. So
yeah,
I agree.
100%.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Marlene.